The morning sun filtered through the high glass windows of Brentwood First National Bank, glinting off polished marble floors and gleaming teller counters. Monica Klein, the branch manager, had just finished her third espresso and was already annoyed by the sight of a man standing at the front desk without an appointment. She walked over, heels tapping sharply, adjusting the cuff of her crisp navy blazer. The man in question, Jerome Walker, wore a simple gray hoodie and jeans. He stood patiently, holding a worn leather folder in his hand. His posture was calm, but his eyes scanned the room like someone who'd spent a lifetime being underestimated. "Can I help you?" Monica asked, her tone professional, yet thinly veiled with irritation. "Yes," Jerome replied politely. "I need to speak to someone about opening a trust account." Monica arched an eyebrow. "We don't handle that kind of request without a scheduled consultation, sir." "Especially not for walk-ins." Jerome smiled slightly, unbothered. "That's fine. I can wait." The manager looked him over. Hoodie, no visible luxury watch, folder instead of a briefcase. "Sir, trust accounts typically require a minimum deposit of $250,000. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at one of our partner banks. There's a community branch 2 blocks down." Jerome raised his eyes to meet hers. "I'm exactly where I need to be." There was something about his voice, confident, not defensive, that made Monica hesitate, but only for a moment. She gestured toward the sitting area. "Fine. Have a seat. I'll see if one of our junior associates can spare a moment." She turned on her heel and walked away, muttering to the assistant manager, "Probably just another fraud check. He'll be gone in 20. At that moment, Dylan, a young associate who'd recently started at the branch, came around the corner holding a tablet. He noticed Jerome and approached with a friendlier tone. "Hi there, I'm Dylan. I can help you with that trust setup if you'd like." Jerome nodded and followed Dylan to a private consultation desk. "I'll need to make a transfer into the account today." "Sure," Dylan said, typing quickly. "And what amount are we talking about, just so I can prepare the right paperwork?" Jerome leaned forward slightly and opened the folder, revealing a printout of account documentation. He slid it across the table. Dylan's eyes scanned the page, then went wide. "This says $1.7 billion? Monica, who had been watching from behind the glass wall of her office, noticed Dylan's expression and came storming over. "What's going on here?" Jerome glanced up. Calmly, "Just setting up a transfer." Monica snatched the folder and skimmed the paperwork. The color drained from her face as she read the sender's name. Walker International Holdings, a global conglomerate with massive real estate and tech assets. "Is this real?" she asked, her voice now noticeably more careful. Jerome smiled, politely. "Would you like to verify it?" Monica swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how much she had misjudged the man in front of her. Monica's hands trembled slightly as she scanned the printout again. The routing numbers, the corporate signature, the authentication codes, all of it was legitimate. She gave a stiff nod and quickly gestured for Dylan to stay seated. "Mr. Walker, please give me just a moment. I'm going to alert our senior account executive to expedite this for you." Jerome gave a quiet nod, his face unreadable. Back in her office, Monica shut the door and picked up the phone with shaky fingers. "Get Stephen from corporate on the line. Now," she told her assistant, barely managing to keep her voice level. Within minutes, a video call lit up on her desktop. Stephen Lang, the regional VP, appeared on screen. "Monica, what's the emergency?" "I have a client here, Jerome Walker. He's transferring $1.7 billion into a trust account. And She hesitated, the weight of her earlier assumptions clawing at her throat. "I may have made a mistake in how I initially treated him." Stephen raised an eyebrow. "Walker? Of Walker Holdings?" "Yes," she whispered. "Roll." "Out the red carpet. Now, do you know how many banks have been trying to secure his accounts?" "I didn't recognize him," Monica admitted. "He came in alone. No entourage. Hoodie. Quiet. Stephen shook his head slowly. That's exactly how he does things. He doesn't test people's professionalism with money. He tests them with how they treat him before they know who he is. You'd better hope he's feeling gracious. Monica ended the call and hurried back to the consultation desk, where Jerome was now calmly reviewing a document Dylan had pulled up. She offered a tight smile. Mr. Walker, I'd like to personally apologize for the way I greeted you earlier. That's not how we treat our clients, and certainly not someone of your stature. Jerome looked up at her, his eyes calm, but with a trace of something sharper beneath. You don't need to apologize because of my account balance. You should apologize because it was the right thing to do before you saw it. Monica froze, the truth of his words hitting her with unexpected force. Dylan, awkwardly clearing his throat, redirected the conversation. We're just finalizing the transfer request. Mr. Walker, once it's in, would you like to set up notifications or a direct oversight team from our executive division? That won't be necessary, Jerome replied. I'll be moving most of the funds into an urban development trust. I want the money to work for communities that are overlooked, just like I was when I walked in here. He paused and looked directly at Monica. I'm not here for special treatment. I'm here to see if this institution can treat someone with respect before they have something to offer in return. Monica nodded, the weight of the lesson unmistakable. Then, just as Jerome began signing the final documents, the office doors opened again. This time a sharply dressed executive team from corporate had arrived, summoned by Stephen's call. One of them extended a hand to Jerome, smiling widely. We've heard great things about your work in the Detroit and Atlanta development corridors, Mr. Walker. We'd love to schedule a full briefing with our impact investment division. Jerome shook his hand, but his tone remained grounded. Let's make sure everyone at this bank can treat people decently, regardless of their net worth. Then we'll talk about partnerships. Behind them, Monica stood silent. She knew she'd just witnessed the kind of wealth that could shake an entire system. But what had shaken her more was realizing how close she'd come to making him walk away. The entire atmosphere in the branch had shifted. Employees who had barely noticed Jerome earlier were now peeking around corners and whispering, their curiosity piqued by the sudden appearance of corporate executives. But Jerome remained focused. He wasn't interested in the show of respect that only came after his worth had been revealed. He was thinking about what would come next. Outside, Jerome stepped into the warm afternoon sun as Dylan followed behind with a folder of temporary paperwork and a formal welcome packet. We'll have everything transferred and verified by this evening. Is there anything else we can do for you, Mr. Walker? Jerome took the folder but didn't immediately respond. He looked around the neighborhood. Rows of small businesses, a few boarded-up storefronts, families walking by, kids on bikes. Actually, he said thoughtfully, there is. He pointed toward a worn-down brick building across the street. That used to be a community library, shut down 4 years ago. I want to buy it, restore it, turn it into a space for education, mentoring, legal help, a hub for anyone who needs a hand up, not just a handout. Dylan blinked. You want the bank to finance that? Jerome chuckled softly. No, I'll finance it. I want the bank to match a small percentage, 1%, not for the money, for the principal. I want to see if you'll stand beside your clients when it's not about profit margins. I'll take that back to corporate, Dylan said, almost in awe. Monica had stepped outside too, her posture different now. No longer stiff with superiority, but weighed down with something closer to humility. Mr. Walker, she said, her voice tentative, I'd like to personally oversee your community project if you'll allow it. Jerome turned to her, considering. That depends, he said calmly. Will you be overseeing it because it's my project or because it's a cause that matters? She swallowed hard. Because it matters, or at least it should have all along. I have a lot to learn. Jerome nodded once. We all do. That night the story spread quickly across social media and into news cycles. A quiet billionaire had walked into a local bank branch and changed everything. not by flashing power, but by revealing what happens when dignity meets discrimination. Headlines ranged from "The Billionaire You've Never Heard Of" to "Man with 1.7 B gets treated like a nobody," until they see his account. People were divided. Some praised Jerome's humility and mission. Others asked why it took a massive balance for the system to listen. But one thing was certain: change had begun. Meanwhile, inside Jerome's modest townhouse, he opened a small wooden box. Inside was a photo of his grandmother, the woman who had raised him, who worked 3 jobs and still made sure he got to school on time. On the back, written in faded ink, were her words: "Dignity is not given, it's kept, even when no one sees it." Jerome smiled faintly, then looked out the window toward the old library building. The lights inside flickered on, contractors already getting to work. It was just the beginning. Weeks passed, and the abandoned library transformed day by day. What had once been a crumbling brick building filled with dust and silence was now alive with possibility. Fresh paint covered the walls in deep blues and warm golds. Rows of computers lined the study rooms. A reading nook for children sat near the front, complete with beanbags and picture books. And on the second floor, Jerome had built something special, a quiet space for young entrepreneurs to learn how to build wealth with integrity. The grand opening drew a larger crowd than anyone expected. Local news stations were parked outside. Before sunrise, students arrived with parents, and curious community members filled the sidewalks. Even people who had never set foot in a bank were talking about what Jerome Walker had done. No ribbon-cutting ceremony, no fanfare. Just Jerome standing on the library steps, thanking everyone who helped make it happen. "Education is power," he said into the mic, his voice steady and full. "But the system hasn't always given power equally. This place? This is our turn to change that." From the back of the crowd, Monica watched quietly, her expression no longer guarded. She had stepped down from her managerial role and now led community banking initiatives for underserved neighborhoods, starting with Jerome's. The media eventually moved on to other stories, but the impact stuck. Jerome's Center became a model replicated in other cities: Chicago, Atlanta, Baltimore. Quietly, steadily, a movement had begun, and people remembered the man who started it, not with wealth, but with the courage to show up and be seen when no one expected him to matter. One afternoon, as Jerome was reviewing blueprints for the next project, a young boy approached him in the library. "Are you the guy from the bank video?" Jerome smiled. "That's me." The boy shifted, pulling a notebook from his backpack. "I want to start my own sneaker brand someday. Can I show you my sketches?" Jerome pulled up a chair. "I'd love that." And in that moment, surrounded by books, computers, and opportunity, Jerome knew the legacy wasn't in the billions. It was in the belief he'd left behind. One that said, "You are not invisible. You are not forgotten. You belong here."